Welcome back everyone to the Hello World Guide. This is another episode of the Raycasting series, and in this video we are going to finally implement the editing functionality for adding things into our map. So to begin with that, I'm going to first of all go ahead and open up map.h. So in here there are a number of important changes. The first one being that since we want to change our things, this function getThings now actually returns a reference to the vector of things, not just a constant reference but an actual modifiable reference. And if I go ahead and open up map.cpp, you can see that this function is no longer marked as const and it returns the whole reference. And the other big important change is that when saving our map, we do not just save it like that. We don't just save it with the default configuration, like the default things that we were doing earlier. Instead, we do not do any other thing but use the things member variable, and this member variable will now be changed and populated by our editor. So to do that, let's go ahead and open up the editor.h, and you can see that well, in here there are a number of very important changes. Firstly, instead of putting all of the code in our run function, we have created two new functions, which is a run grid editor and a run thing editor function. Depending on whether we are in grid editing or thing editing mode, we might want to run different editors, so we've got these functions. The common code will be in this function, while the specific code will be in these functions. And then we have got a rebuilt block map here. Now the reason we've got this is because well, we have got a custom block map in editor. The reason we don't use the map's default block map is firstly because things move in the game. We could regenerate that, but in the editor we actually have to take some special cases into account for doing the block map. And here we have got our rectangle shaped cell view like we had earlier, our first mouse and last mouse position, all of that. And the other thing that is changed is that now we have got a boolean saying is thing mode. Now this just represents whether we are in thing editing mode or we are in grid editing mode. If it is false, then we are in grid editing mode, and if it is true, then we are in thing editing mode. Then we have got two pointers. One is to a hovered thing, which represents what we are currently hovering over, and then we have got a selected thing, which represents what we have actually selected. So these two will be very important for actually actually selecting thing and changing their properties. So we've got a texture number here and current layer just like we had earlier. Of course, we have got our block map as well. So the basic idea is that we have got a boolean saying that the block map is dirty, and what that means is basically that something has been moved and the block map needs to be updated. And then we have got our block map just like we had in the map, but instead of having a thing pointer, this actually has a map thing pointer because that is what we are going to use now. So let's go ahead and open up editor.cpp and take a look. So let's go to the beginning, and you can see that inside of the constructor we set out all of our cell properties, and we also set the block map dirty to true initially, and just initialize hover thing and selected things to their default null pointer values, and is thing mode is also false by default. So when we are running our editor, first we check if our block map is dirty, and if it is, we just rebuild the block map. Now the next thing that we do is that we create a vector 2i, which is our mouse position, and we get that vector, and if it's this is basically the window moving code that we had earlier. None of this has changed. And we also draw the map depending on our current layer. We just draw that layer here, and then we have got our main menu code just like we had earlier, and then we have got our editing options. Now here there is one important change, which is that we have got a new option here, which is editing mode. Now this basically represents whether we are editing our grid or we are editing things. So we just have an ImGui selectable. If our thing mode is false, then grid is selected, and if the user presses that, we set it to false, and if the user presses things, we set this to true. So after that we have also got a separator so that it looks better visually, and this is pretty basic things. So it just allows us to switch between grid mode and things mode dynamically. And then we have got our layer selection. This is also present in things mode because we might want to kind of look at how things are positioned based on the floor or the ceiling, so we can change the layer when we are in the things mode. After that we have got a separator, and then we have got our if statement. Now if we are in thing mode, then we just run the thing editor, and if we are not in thing mode, then we just run the grid editor. And after that we have got the code for the resize button, and then we have got all of our, we have not all, just the resize pop-up here, which is going to allow us to resize the window. And then we just end the ImGui window and we set the view. Pretty basic stuff just like we had earlier. So the real thing that we have to look into is what's actually happening inside of our run grid editor function. So this is actually not much different. So we've got basically all of the things that we had earlier. We set the mouse capture and everything, and all of this is basically now inside of this one function instead of being all over the place. So this doesn't really have any new code here. And now we're going to go and run thing editor, where we are actually doing all of our thing editing. So first we make sure that we ImGui does not want mouse capture, and and if it does not want mouse capture, then we use basically allow the user to select things here. So the way this works is that we get our mouse position converted to our world position and a map position as well. Then we check if our mouse button is pressed and we store it into the local variable, because we are gonna need to use this a couple of times. And if it was pressed, then we set our selected thing to null pointer. The reason is that if the user presses at an empty place, obviously the selecting thing should disappear, so the user shouldn't be selecting anything. If he clicks on an empty space, it should deselect everything. And if the user clicked on a a thing where a place in the map where there was a thing, then we of course want to set that to selected thing. Now regardless of whether the user pressed or not, we set the hover thing to null pointer, because we are going to set it again here. And then we make sure that our map position is within the correct range of the map. We don't want it to be out of range, and if it is, then all we need to do is we need to basically go ahead and loop over all of the things present in this map grid cell. So this gives us the grid cell that the user pressed in, and based on that grid cell we just get the block map. And the reason we use block map is to speed up the selection. We don't want to check against everything in the map, so we just get our block map and we get each thing. For each thing we get the definition. Now you can see there's an interesting piece of code here which we calculate the thing size. Now if our definition size is 0, then we set the thing size to 0.5. Why is that? And why do we actually need to do this? So the reason behind this is that there are many things in our game that don't have collision, so their size is 0. For example, the light bulb. However, if we actually click those things, we don't want them to just not be selectable, because this way they won't be in the block map, they won't be selectable, and we won't be able to basically do anything with them. So this means that this will actually not work. So what we do is that if the size of the thing is 0, then we just consider it to have an arbitrary size of 0.5. So this way we can select those things and everything, but of course the actual size doesn't change. We just change it for the display and the selection in the editor only, and in the game they will still not have any collision on them, but we will be able to select them in the editor. So what we do is we calculate the half size and everything, and then we just make sure that our world position, which is the point, is actually within this start and end. And if it is, then we set the hover thing true, and if we also press the mouse button, we set the selected thing to this thing as well. So we set the hover thing and a selected thing to the same thing if the pressed was true, as we just set the hover thing. Alright, so after that we basically just draw everything, because we need to draw all of our things as well. We only draw them when we are in thing mode. So what we do is we create the rectangle shape. This is similar to the game code but a bit different. We set the outline thickness, we loop over each of the things, we calculate the definition, and here again you can see we calculate our thing size just like we did earlier. We set the line size, position and rotation, like we were doing when we were drawing the game. Not much different here. Now for the color, we have got a bit of an interesting thing here. So by default the color for drawing the things is blue. However, if the size is 0, we set the color to red. Now this is actually based on the definition size, so that whenever we see a red box, we know that this means that this is only being displayed at this size for the editor, and actually it doesn't have any size. So for that we just display it in red to make sure that it's correct. And if the thing is hovered, we display it in yellow. If it's equal to our, if the address of this is equal to our hover thing pointer, then we set it to yellow. And if it is equal to selected thing, we set it to green, and we do this in this order. So selected thing has the most priority, after that we've got hover thing, and after that we've got size. And if none of this is true, then we just have it blue. We set the color, and you can see we draw it. And another thing that we don't do in the game is that we check if the definition's texture is greater than or equal to 0, and if it is, then we basically draw a sprite as well. So we calculate the rectangle of the sprite by getting the texture index and the texture size, and then we go ahead and create a vector 2f for size, and then we set the sprite scale and position, and then we just draw that sprite. And the sprite is not drawn if the texture is actually less than 0, which means if it's the player or something else that doesn't have a texture, then it won't be drawn. Alright, so what do we do in the end? Now here we have actually got our thing selection procedure. So if our thing is selected, then what do we do it? So here we have got actually editing that thing that we have selected. So what we do is that ImGui does not provide any real options for editing input size t variables. Now it does provide input scalar. However, we are not going to use that because we want to clamp it based on our own values. So we are going to calculate some local variables here. So the index is just going to be the selected things index, and the position we are gonna create this as an array and base it on the selected thing position x and y, because SF vector 2f is not a plain old data structure, so we can't just use that. So what we do is we create the text and the input int, and we pass it our address and pretty simple stuff. And for the position we do it similarly, we pass it our position array, but this time we use a drag float too, so that we can drag to kind of position the player. And another thing is that we set the speed to 0.2 because the default was 1, which is of course way too large, since one grid cell is 1 unit. Actually this should be 0.1. So another thing is that after doing all of this stuff, we set the selected thing index to this, but we first clamp it to the local index. So when we're setting to the local index, we first clamp it between 0 and based on the number of the maximum index of the things that we have got, so that we never get out of range. And then we set the position x and y here correctly. Now there is a small problem right now, but let's just run make and see how it goes. So you can see if I go here, we've got these things here, and we've got a bulb there as well, and you can see this. And if I press escape, I can go under editing options, where we've got our editing mode. Now I can click on things to go under things mode. You can see that this bulb is displayed in red while the others are displayed in blue. I can hover over anything and make it displayed in yellow. I can select this, I can change its position, I can change it to, for example, 5, and you can see it moves there. And I can go ahead and select the player, I can move the player a bit here like that, and I can go ahead and save that. So if I go ahead and save that and I run make again, you can see that the player is now at a different position, and so is this. Now there are a couple of problems, a couple of things that we have not yet implemented. The first and probably the most obvious one is that we have not made the angle editing, so we need to kind of add that as well. So I'm going to just go ahead and add an angle here, and for the angle we don't actually need to create a local variable, since we don't need to clamp it, and we also don't need to basically do anything with it really. So we are going to have to just pass it directly. It's just a plain float, nothing complicated. So we can just say selected thing, and we can say angle here. And for the speed, I'm actually going to leave it actually make it 2, so that it's a bit faster, I think. Let me run make. And what you can see that now is that I can go here, I can go under things mode, I can for example select the player is at 2 and 3 here. I can change the angle of the player, and I can change it back to 0 basically, to make the player look straight ahead. And then I can go ahead and save that, and if I run it again, what you can see is that now the player is facing straight forward. The other problem that I was talking about is that if I select this and I move this to say 7 or 8 for example, let's move it to 7, and if I deselect it and then I try to select it, you can see I can no longer select it. The reason for that is because we never actually update the block map. So what we will do is that we will go ahead and run well actually we will just go here and we will create an SF vector 2f here, and we are going to just call it alt position, and we are going to set this to selected thing position. And in the end, after setting the position, updated position, we are going to check if our alt position is not equal to our selected things position. Then we are going to go ahead and set our block map dirty to true, and we just update the whole block map, since in the editor things aren't going to be constantly moving around, so it isn't really like a huge performance cost to basically draw it again, to calculate the whole block map again, because things are only going to be moving at some time after some time. So I can deselect this, and you can see I can still select it again. It now works. I can move this here, and I can deselect it, and I can still select it again. And yeah, with that we have got pretty much a working thing editor in our game here. So yeah guys, this is gonna be pretty much it for this video. Of course our editor is currently lacking in 2 very important functionalities, which is actually adding and removing things from the map. So that is what we are gonna implement in the next video. Make sure to stay tuned for that, so you don't and make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss that, and share this video with other people as well. And I'll see you in the next one, and bye.